Do you know what silence sounds like? Not the ordinary kind. Not the silence of a library or a country road at night. No, I mean the kind of silence that presses in on you until your own heartbeat sounds like a drum you wish would stop. That silence. The one that comes after you've made the worst mistake of your life. That silence became my home. And it all started the night I told my parents I didn't need them anymore. I was 23, maybe 24. Old enough to believe I had the world figured out, young enough to have no idea how stupid that belief was. I'd rehearsed the words for months. I'd told myself that freedom meant cutting ties, that independence meant severing roots. My parents, Robert and Elaine, were not perfect. God no. They had their flaws, their tempers, their blind spots. But they were steady. They were there. And I, in my arrogance, saw their presence as a prison. I remember the smell of that kitchen the night I did it. My mother had just pulled a tray of lasagna from the oven. The edges were bubbling, the cheese crisping to a golden brown. She smiled when she set it on the table. A small, weary smile. The kind a mother makes when she hopes dinner will hold her family together just a little longer. My father was sitting in his usual chair, the wood creaking beneath his weight, the evening news buzzing low from the living room. Me. My chest was tight. My palms damp. I knew this was the night. I don't remember the exact words. Funny, isn't it? You plan for months and when the moment comes, it spills out messy. What I do remember is my father's eyes. Gray, steady, the eyes of a man who'd worked long shifts just to keep a roof over our heads. And I remember saying something like, I can't keep living under your rules. I need my freedom. I don't want this anymore. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. My mother's hand trembled as she set her glass of water down. The sound of it on the table was louder than the television. Freedom. That word. I said it like it was salvation. Like I was stepping out of chains. But what I didn't realize was that I was the one holding the chains all along. That night I walked out. I didn't take the lasagna. I didn't look back to see if my mother cried. Though God help me, I know she did. I didn't stay to hear my father's reply. I left, convincing myself I was walking into sunlight when really I was marching into a storm. You see, when you grow up under the shadow of love, you take it for granted. You mistake familiarity for suffocation. You think love is an obstacle, not a lifeline. And so you cut it off, convinced you'll breathe better without it. But freedom without foundation? It's just falling. In the months that followed, I surrounded myself with noise to drown out the silence. I went out with friends who weren't really friends. Names blur now. Mark, Justin, a girl named Alicia who laughed too loud at things that weren't funny. We filled our nights with neon lights, cheap liquor, smoke curling up in dim apartments that smelled of sweat and regret. I told myself this was life. This was freedom. No curfews, no questions, no judgment. But in the mornings the silence returned. The cheap walls of my apartment seemed thinner at dawn. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like a funeral dirge. I'd stare at the ceiling, the plaster cracked like veins, and wonder why my chest felt so heavy. Why my so-called freedom tasted so bitter. There's this memory that won't leave me. One night I was out with those friends, if you can call them that. The bar was crowded, the music loud, the smell of spilled beer and sweat clinging to the air. I laughed at their jokes. I raised my glass. And then mid-laugh I felt it. That silence. Not in the room but inside me. Like no amount of noise could cover it. Like I was invisible even when surrounded by people. And it hit me then, my parents would have seen me. Even in my worst moments they always saw me. And I'd cut that off. I didn't call. I didn't visit. Birthdays passed. Holidays passed. Each one I told myself I was too busy. Each one I sank deeper into the quiet I'd chosen. There's a weight to regret. It doesn't slam into you all at once. It seeps. It drips. Like water finding every crack in stone until the whole structure weakens. For me it showed up in little ways. I'd see a mother walking with her son at the grocery store, her hand resting lightly on his back, and I'd look away too fast. I'd hear my father's favorite song, Springsteen, Thunder Road, playing faintly from a passing car, and my throat would tighten. Small moments, but together they carved me hollow. And yet, I didn't turn back. Pride's a funny thing. Keeps you locked in cages you built yourself. I told myself it was too late. That going back would mean admitting weakness. So I stayed alone, convincing myself solitude was strength. But you can only run from truth so long before it finds you. One night, it must have been late winter, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. 3 in the morning. Unknown number. My head was heavy from the whiskey I'd drowned myself in. I almost ignored it. Almost. But I answered. And on the other end was my cousin Mia. Her voice was shaking. She didn't have to say much. Just my father's name, just the word hospital. That was enough. I sat there in the dark, the silence louder than ever, realizing I'd chosen freedom over love, and now love might be gone forever. I didn't go to the hospital right away. That's the part that still makes me sick when I think about it. I should have thrown on my shoes, grabbed my keys, driven through the night. But I didn't. I just sat there. Sat there with my phone still warm in my hand, the hum of the radiator filling the room, the smell of stale whiskey still clinging to me. Fear does that. It freezes you. It wasn't just fear of what I'd find, it was fear of what I wouldn't be able to undo. Fear of seeing my father lying there and realizing that the last words I'd said to him were words of rejection. Fear that my pride had stolen my chance to say goodbye. I sat there until dawn, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, listening to my neighbors upstairs shuffle around, life carrying on like nothing had happened. And then I did what cowards do. I convinced myself there was still time. I told myself he'll be fine. He's always fine. I'll call tomorrow. But tomorrow is a liar. When I finally went, it was too late. My father was gone. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I don't remember parking or walking through those sliding doors that smelled of antiseptic and overcooked cafeteria food. What I do remember is my mother's face. Her eyes were swollen, her lips pressed tight like she was holding back a scream that would tear the world apart if she let it out. She didn't say a word when she saw me. Just turned her head. And in that small gesture I felt the full weight of what I'd done. I wasn't there. Not when she called the ambulance. Not when they wheeled him in. Not when the doctors tried and failed. I wasn't there. Freedom had kept me away. Pride had kept me away. And now my father's story had ended without me. That night when I went back to my empty apartment, it was the loneliest place on earth. I dropped onto the couch, springs poking through the cushions, the smell of dust rising around me, and I felt something I'd never felt before. Not anger. Not sadness. Something worse. Emptiness. I looked at the photographs on the wall. Crooked frames holding faces that no longer belonged to my life. Friends with arms around my shoulders. A girl I once thought I loved, her smile frozen in time. My father standing with me at a baseball game when I was 13. I couldn't look at that one for long. His arm was around me, his smile unguarded, and I couldn't reconcile that man with the silence of the hospital bed. And I kept thinking about the lasagna. That stupid lasagna bubbling at the edges. My mother's hand trembling when she set down her glass. My father's fork frozen halfway to his mouth. That was my last dinner with him. That was how I'd chosen to end it. Grief is strange. It doesn't just sit in your chest. It gets into your body. It's physical. I felt it in my arms, heavy like lead. In my legs like I was wading through water. In my throat, tight as if every word I wanted to say was stuck forever. For weeks I shut myself in. Curtains drawn. Phone off. The fridge empty except for half a carton of milk gone sour. My days blurred. The clock ticked, the sun rose and set, but time didn't feel real. And in that silence, because silence always finds you, I heard his voice. Not literally but in memory. Him calling me champ. Him singing Springsteen in the car off-key, tapping the steering wheel. Him asking if I'd eaten. Those little things that feel like nothing when they happen but become everything when they're gone. I thought about the last time he hugged me. It was months before I cut him off. We were standing in the driveway and he pulled me in close, one of those strong, sturdy embraces that make you feel safe whether you want to or not. I pulled away too quickly, embarrassed, eager to get on with my so-called freedom. I didn't know it was the last time. That thought, I didn't know it was the last time, haunted me. Still does. Eventually the world forced me back out. The bills piled up. The landlord's knocks got louder. Work didn't wait. I dragged myself into the office, the fluorescent lights buzzing, the smell of burnt coffee in the air, my co-workers' voices grating against the ache inside me. I pasted on a smile. Nodded when they talked about their weekends. Laughed when they made jokes. None of it felt real. I was a ghost wearing my own skin. At night, I'd walk the city streets just to avoid going back to that apartment. The air was sharp, exhaust fumes mixing with the smell of food trucks. Neon signs flickered. People hurried past, their faces glowing in the light of their phones. And I'd wonder, how many of them were like me? How many were walking through the night carrying regret they couldn't put down? I started drinking more. At first to sleep. Then to forget. Then just to feel something. The burn in my throat was better than the emptiness. The clink of the bottle against the counter was company when I had none. I told myself it was fine. Everyone drinks. But deep down I knew I was trying to drown a silence that couldn't be drowned. My mother. She didn't return my calls. Not at first. I left voicemails, long rambling, shame-soaked messages. Apologies that sounded pathetic even to my own ears. She stayed quiet. And in her silence I felt the full weight of her grief. I had left her alone to carry it. I used to dream about her. Dreams where I was back in that kitchen, the lasagna steaming, my father humming in his chair. I'd open my mouth to take it all back, to say I'm sorry, I was wrong, I don't want freedom if it means losing this. But in dreams, like in life, the words often wouldn't come. I'd wake up with my jaw clenched, my pillow damp, my chest aching like someone had punched through my ribs. The lowest point came one night. God, I'll never forget it. I was sitting on the bathroom floor, the tile cold against my skin, the air sharp with the smell of cleaning bleach. A bottle of whiskey tipped over beside me, half empty. I caught my reflection in the mirror. Eyes bloodshot. Hair matted. Skin pale. And I didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked like a stranger. And that terrified me. Because I realized, this was what my father would remember me as. Not the boy he'd taken to baseball games. Not the son he'd hugged in the driveway. This broken, hollow man. That was my final gift to him. That's when I understood what regret really is. It's not just sadness. It's not just guilt. It's the knowledge that you can't undo. That some doors once closed stay closed forever. And yet, in that lowest place something shifted. Not a miracle. Not a sudden revelation. Just a flicker. A whisper. The smallest thought. Maybe I don't have to stay here. I wish I could tell you I stood up that night, cleaned myself up, turned everything around. But that's not how it works. Healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in inches. In tiny trembling steps. For me, the first step was the shower. So I turned on the water, hot and steaming, and let it run over me. Washed the whiskey from my skin, the sweat from my hair. And in that moment, under the rush of water, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Alive. Not better. Not healed. Just alive. And sometimes that's enough to begin. That was the start. The smallest start. But even a whisper can break silence if you let it. And in that silence I began, slowly, painfully, to rebuild. You don't rebuild your life in a day. You don't fix years of pride and a graveyard of mistakes with a single apology, or a single prayer, or even a single act of will. You rebuild, in fragments. For me, it began with the shower, as I told you. Then the next morning it was breakfast. A real one. Not whiskey. Not cold pizza from 2 nights before. Just 2 eggs, scrambled, the yolks a little runny because I'd forgotten how long to keep them on the pan. Toast burned around the edges. The smell filled my kitchen, and for the first time in a long time I felt like maybe I was worth feeding. I sat at the table, fork in hand, staring at that plate like it was a miracle. And in a way it was. Because it meant I'd chosen to keep going. The grief didn't leave. It never does. You don't move on from losing someone you love, especially when you've driven the knife in yourself. The grief stays. But what changes, slowly, painfully, is how you carry it. I started walking again. Just down the block at first, the air sharp with the smell of gasoline and rain on pavement. My legs heavy, my breath short. I'd pass by families, fathers holding kids by the hand, and I'd feel that old ache in my chest. But I kept walking. Because each step was proof I hadn't surrendered to the silence. My mother. That took longer. Much longer. I wrote letters. I didn't send them at first. I filled notebooks with apologies, with memories, with every word I wished I'd said before my father was gone. I'd sit there at my desk, the lamp buzzing, the ink smudging under my hand, writing like the paper was the only witness who could bear my shame. Eventually I sent one. Just one. A simple note. I'm sorry. I miss you. If you ever want to see me again, I'll be here. Weeks passed. No reply. The silence was a punishment I'd earned. Then one afternoon I came home from work. My shirt sticking to my back with sweat, the city air thick with the smell of hot asphalt. And there it was. An envelope on my doormat. My mother's handwriting, neat and careful, the way she'd written notes for my lunchbox in grade school. I didn't open it right away. I sat on the floor, envelope in my hands, heart pounding like it might break free. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, her perfume. I could see the indent of her pen where she'd pressed too hard. Inside was a single sentence. Just one. You hurt me, but you are still my son. That was it. No forgiveness. No invitation. Just a thread. But when you've been drowning in silence, even a thread feels like a rope. I clung to that. I didn't rush to her door. I didn't demand reconciliation. I just kept writing. Short letters. Updates about my day. Small confessions. Little memories of my father. And slowly, her letters came back. Sparse at first. Then longer. Then with hints of warmth I thought I'd lost forever. Our relationship will never be what it was. There are scars. There is distance. There are things I will never be able to undo. But we speak now. We share meals sometimes. And in those meals I hear echoes of the kitchen I left behind. The lasagna bubbling, the fork frozen midair. And though the ache never disappears, I also feel something else. Gratitude. Because broken things can still hold water. Cracked voices can still sing. And estranged sons can still find their way, inch by inch, back to love. I wish I could tell you I became a saint after that. That I quit drinking altogether. That I became the perfect son, the perfect man. But the truth is, no. I stumble. I fall. Some nights I still hear the silence louder than anything else. Some mornings I still wake up with regret like a stone in my chest. But here's the difference now. I don't stay down. I run sometimes. Slowly, awkwardly, pounding pavement with breath that comes short but sure. I cook more often. Pastas, stews, pancakes on Sundays. The smell of butter and coffee filling my apartment, reminding me of mornings long gone. I read again. Books my father once loved. Steinbeck. Perver. Sometimes I hear his voice in the words, and instead of breaking I let myself feel it. And when I sit with my mother, her hair now streaked with more gray, her hands thinner, the lines on her face deeper, I don't rush. I don't cut the moment short. I sit. I listen. Because I know now how fragile time is. Here's what I've learned standing on the other side of that silence. Freedom without love is exile. Pride without humility is a coffin. And regret, though it never leaves, can be a teacher if you let it. The boy who stormed out for freedom thought life was about breaking away. The man who sits before you now knows life is about holding on. Holding on to the hands that steady you. Holding on to the moments that seem small but turn out to be everything. Holding on, even when you've already let go once and sworn you couldn't come back. I carry my scars openly now. They remind me who I was and who I can never afford to be again. They remind me that silence is always waiting, but so is the chance to speak. To reach. To try again, however imperfectly. So no, this story doesn't end with triumph. It doesn't end with perfection. It ends, like life, with a mixture of both. Pain and peace. Regret and gratitude. Loss and somehow the quiet pulse of hope. Because even in the darkest silence, there is still a chance, however small, to whisper back. And that's all I've tried to do, since that night I walked out of my parents' kitchen. Whisper back. Not perfectly. Not heroically. Just honestly. And maybe for some of us that's what freedom really means.